All right. Welcome back to the Living Streams Church podcast down in the basement of the Living Streams Church. I don't know why we have the at the front of all of our names, but it's pretty cool. There are a lot of living waters, desert springs, all those things here in Phoenix. So have to get a little bit more specific.
We have the definite article in front of ours.
Yes, we are the Living Streams Church. And this is our podcast.
Yeah.
And I am the David Stockton, which there's about 4 billion of them.
Are there?
Yeah.
Do you know how many Jeff Gokees there are?
How many?
Big zero.
Really?
I'm the only one.
Wow.
I'm the original.
And we know about the Clark Jr.
2 of us, my dad and I.
Yeah, bam.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Actually, I was going to say this in my sermon this coming Sunday. I use ChatGPT to search, like, define love in one sentence based on, and I was saying, like, you know, different people's names, you know.
Okay.
And then I was like, I'm going to see what they'd say about me. And I was like, define love from all of David Stockton's sermons. And it was just like, could you be more specific?
It was like computing.
Everybody else just bam, popped right up. This was like, could you be more specific?
That's funny.
I was like, Living Streams Church in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I clicked it and it was just like searching, searching, searching.
We're sorry, please try again.
I was like, I just kept adding prompts, not broader prompts, just me, more specific me. And then finally it came up with something that was just mind-blowing and earth-shattering.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sure.
so proud of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
But yeah, so
like,
not a big deal.
Yeah.
We know that. Not a big deal. But anyways, we're here today tracking with our Advent series again. Jeff talked to us about hope 2 Sundays ago. I talked about joy 1 Sunday ago. And CJ talked about peace yesterday, because this is Monday for us. I don't know what day it is for you out there. But we talked about those things. We got love coming up this Sunday. And these are not our version of Advent series. This is, church-wide historical considerations leading up to Christmas Day, the celebration of Christmas Day, the advent of these things. When Jesus came, he brought these things. And so we've been talking through those things, and then in the week we've been trying to do a little deeper dive into our messages and share the things that didn't make it into that message that were important, but also just hanging out a little bit.
Yeah.
And just so in case you don't know, Jeff Gokee, he said his name, but Jeff's here and CJ is here, and Dalton's back there in the corner hiding behind something. How you doing, Dalton?
I'm good.
Solid.
What else do you want?
Commentary there. No, I love it. Yeah.
Cool.
So, let's jump into this. How you guys doing?
Good.
Did you have a good week? Do you have a peaceful week, a joyful week, or a hopeful week?
It's a good. I've been working on joy. Yeah.
Joy is what you've been working on.
Yeah, I've been working on joy.
Do you still have the ribbons?
I found I wrote a little card, and we got a Christmas tree, and so hung it up on the Christmas tree this week. So I think I'm working on joy.
You have white lights or colored lights on
white
your Christmas
lights.
tree?
I can't stand colored lights,
Okay.
but God bless the people who have that.
And do you have like tons of ornaments or just theme ornaments? Or
It's a cluster of ornaments. Our family is, it's like when we first got married, it was just like the cheapest thing that we could get at so we've kept on to some of those because they were, and then it was like, little things here and there. We've tried to get better over the years, but it does not make any sense at all.
Do you have homemade ornaments on there?
Some, but it's really just anything that anyone wants to put on the tree, they can. And so we really, I love, because it's kind of our family on a tree to some extent.
Oh, okay.
So that's been kind of fun. And then it's, Maisie's my daughter-in-law, so bringing her in. So she's contributed, which has been.
Is it fake tree or real tree?
Real tree.
We
used to do fake tree, but it's my mother-in-law's from Canada, and she comes in every year. And I think it's just the smell. There's an authenticity.
The smell of your mother-in-law?
She's fantastic.
Is that what you're talking about?
She actually comes in tomorrow, and she stays for a month. It's the best.
The smell of the tree is obviously
it's
what
great.
you're talking about.
Yeah, she's great too. Yeah. No, I've been working on joy this week. I think that's been very challenging. I find myself to be, I was asking the question because I think I'm a joyful person, but I'm like, man, what's happened in the last couple decades to so that's where something I'm like, people would say, oh, you're a joyful guy. But then in the last, I think, probably 15 years, I'm like, man, why is that something that I have to work on? I think it's just life and busy and head down and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I've been I was challenged.
What about you?
Challenged by
What's your
that.
Christmas tree situation? I know your shoe game is strong. What's your Christmas tree game?
I mean, all our ornaments are very nostalgic.
Okay.
We just have like every ornament has a story, a memory.
Yep.
Yes.
Someone gave it to us for this reason. One of our traditions before we even moved to San Francisco was because I always traveled to San Francisco because I grew up an hour east of San Francisco. And
You take your ornaments with you to San Francisco?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's
awesome.
When I moved there,
Yeah.
my little box of ornaments.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
I mean, Renee and I have ornaments from like when we were dating.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's how committed you were to San Francisco. You took your ornaments.
Well, yeah. Do you guys when you move, you don't bring your ornaments with
I
you?
took mine everywhere with me. You didn't take your ornaments with you?
To Ireland?
Yeah, come on.
No, we actually
Well,
had a party before we left, and people made us ornaments,
Okay. That's
and
nice.
most of them
Okay.
were really
Okay.
good.
But you were
We
coming
took
back.
those, but
You were coming back.
but we weren't
We
committed.
took our ornaments. Yeah, so all of our ornaments, like we have ornaments from like when we got engaged and, like different vacations. Like a lot of times when we travel, that's one of our favorite things to do as a couple and then now as a family.
buy an
When we
ornament,
travel,
back.
we'll like get an ornament to
Brittany loves
commemorate that. So it's just like this fun, you're pulling out the ornaments.
I really love how intentional you and Renee are. Yeah.
Bam.
It's kind of funny.
So
because
describe your tree here.
I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Like,
No,
I'm
no,
really
it's-
not that intentional.
No. You like what was it? Was it last week when like at the end of the month you guys reflect like go through the photos? I was like, Petty,
Bam.
we suck.
Okay.
No, but I was like, I honestly, I
This
was
is
like,
something-
that means a lot. I thought that was good.
Sometimes what will happen though is I'll say things that are impressive. So let me give you that's like the Instagram post. Let me give you the
Oh, that's
There
good.
you
Oh,
go.
there we go.
my friend JT.
We did it twice this year.
We did it 4 times.
But actually, that's so good.
My friend JT, he started this thing, Recollect, which is really cool. I think I have a website and everything. Like, you should totally check it out. It's really cool. And they've done it every year for like 10 years. And they make books with the pictures and the stories and all the things, and
That's
then they
so
print
cool,
them,
though.
and they have all these books printed so that their kids will have like a library of stuff to go back and it's all about like God's faithfulness to their family.
Wow.
That's legit. Like that's the
Yeah, yeah,
Instagram
oh,
post.
totally.
I'm like, my friend JT's doing it, and I'm like, babe, we should do it. And so like January, February,
And you're
we're
like,
doing
oh, gosh,
it.
this stuff's so busy.
But one
man.
but one of the things you do in it is when you're doing it, you're going through the month and you're thinking like, how has God been faithful to us? And then what are our prayer requests? And then one of the things you go is like, who in our lives has been a blessing to us? And then we send a card. It was called Big Thanks.
Yeah.
And while we're out, we take a picture of ourselves and you go online. It's like $4 and you write a personal note to somebody that has been loving and kind. And when they get it, it feels like they got a gift.
It's in my Bible. It's literally in my Bible.
sent Jeff one.
I keep all like the notes that are most important to me. I keep it in my Bible. Yeah,
That's sweet.
And I have yours in my Bible.
I feel loved.
So real tree, fake tree.
David's getting right back to the.
I gotta know about this tree. I gotta know about this tree. Real tree, fake tree.
Okay, fake tree.
Fake tree.
When we got
Colored
married,
lights, white lights.
when we got married, Renee goes, "We're gonna buy this $150 fake tree because it'll save us money."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "This is stupid." And then she's like, "No, babe, we never have to buy a tree again." Within like 2-3 years, she's like, "I want a real one." I was like, "You're a liar."
Bam.
So we did real for a while, and then our kids are allergic or whatever. It's messy.
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
And
It is
then
messy.
Now we're back to fake, and it's all white lights.
Do you go real?
All white lights, and then also tons of ornaments, or is it
tons?
tons? It's jammed up.
Yes.
Okay, so we are fake tree, but we also cut down a tree every year.
That makes sense. That feels like
It doesn't make sense.
Do you have
No,
trees in-
but,
I'm glad-
but that's what I was going to say.
Trees in the
That's
house?
what that
That's
actually
the beautiful
is. That's
beauty
what I was
of
going to
Jeff
say.
right
That's your
there.
family.
Yeah, you and Brittany get each other, I think. So it doesn't make sense to me, but it does make sense, I guess.
Do you have
out there.
2 in the house?
No, because I'm allergic to the ponderosa hideous tree that we cut down every year.
okay.
And so we just put it outside and put lights on it.
Oh, okay.
Not every year. We've done that. We've done that the past few years. Brittany's into it though.
Yeah.
And it's just me and my daughters going to cut a tree down, and I'm sorry, they're not very helpful at all.
And
But,
are they excited about going?
yeah, they like it.
Okay.
Yeah, we get some Starbucks. And
Okay, all right.
That's what.
Where
they
do you
really
guys go?
like. Well, usually we're too late, and so we get some horrible spot in Payson and get the most hideous ponderosa pine.
I thought you were about to be like,
seen.
usually we're a little late, so we go to Home Depot.
we just go out in the desert.
And we cut a couple of
But when we were in Belize, we would cut down our own tree. Ireland,
cool.
I don't think we did that because you get arrested.
Is there
for
pine
everything
trees
there.
in Belize?
There was pine trees in Belize on this one road. Yeah,
kidding.
they were also very hideous pine trees.
I bet. Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
like that one on Charlie Brown.
But the thing is, we have white and colored lights, and you can't even see the tree because
show me
the
lights?
ornaments is
Oh, the ornaments.
unreal.
Oh.
And it's hideous. I mean, my wife thinks it's awesome, but it's hideous. It's so hideous. But it's fun. And everything. We have like even time capsule ornaments. So every year we pull those out. And it's like when my kids were younger, Eva really liked Justin Bieber or something. And
fun.
she
That's
really
kinda
liked this. So
yeah,
they
that's a great
love
idea.
that part. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
part of the ornament.
That's
putting on
kinda
a
fun.
process.
Super thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was with our foster boys. I took pictures of them and sent them to them,
that's good.
and they were like cracking up because they were real little. But anyway, so that's all Christmas, yada yada.
Yeah.
But let's talk about peace. Let's talk about peace.
Let's get our peace voices
Peace
in.
voice.
Let's bring it down.
Dun, dun, dun. And we asked CJ to talk about peace because he's the most peaceful of us all.
I agree.
Probably, yeah. Look at him. You can
don't
just
know
see
if
it right
that's
now.
true,
and
know.
I just loved your message so much. And yeah, so thank you for that. Why don't you refresh everybody a bit on some of the main points of the message,
Yeah,
and then
sure.
we'll deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to kind of like name for us that peace is something that we want, but we don't always know how to get it. And then kind of knowing that we really need to let Jesus define what that is for us. And so, yeah, I think we catch glimpses of it. We get temporary peace. We, go do a spa day, or we get out of town for a couple of days, or we go on vacation, whatever.
Yeah.
But the thesis of the sermon was that true lasting peace comes only through the war of surrender, which is just like a really robust biblical view of peace. So we kind of started with the Old Testament shalom and New Testament irene. Those are both words that convey this idea of like the absence of stress, which was like more of like a Greek idea, like in the Hellenistic kind of New Testament era. It was more like if we can just get rid of, if we can end wars and end suffering but the Bible's definition, like more of that Old Testament kind of Jewish, like shalom is really like the feeling that filled with the fullness of God.
Which in that New Testament reality, peace was a very, very popular kind of political thing, with the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome.
Yeah.
It was like Rome has figured out how to bring world peace.
Right.
And if everyone will just do the Roman way, there will
that's
be
right.
peace throughout.
Yeah.
And if you
so
don't,
the
we'll
gospel-
crucify you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Jesus said, my peace I give to you,
Yeah.
not as the world
Yeah,
gives. And-
definitely.
And so I think that concept, and then shalom in the Old Testament, it was such that word is almost endless.
Yeah.
You can't really get to the bottom of that. The peace that the Hebrew scriptures, the Hebrew people, when they would describe shalom, it was so much more than just peace. It was wholeness. It was stillness. It was completeness, as well as peace and all of those things. So yeah, I think those are just deep,
Rest
deep waters
and
there.
digest.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah. So that was sort of like the main idea. So then we looked at the account of the shepherds being eyewitnesses and just worked through that. Like, what was that like? We kind of just did narrative of just like, these guys are out there and all of a sudden it's like out of nowhere, beam of light, just kind of, not a really peaceful experience for them. And they were genuinely afraid. And so then they hear the voice of the angels. And so I just really talked about like how our lives can be like that, where we can be going about our business and all of a sudden like something comes, and that's a moment when we need to hear the voice of God, like comforting us. So we talked about that a little bit. And then we talked about the shepherds going to be where Jesus was. Like the words of God were like removed the fear, But in order for them to be filled with the peace, they needed to be in the presence of Christ. They needed to go to that. And so they had to give up a lot. Yeah. And there was it was a cost for them. And actually it was helpful because Rick, who plays on the worship team, came up to me after the first service and was like talking about the shepherds. And he was like, he's like, I never thought about like how big a deal it was for the shepherds to leave their sheep. He's like, shepherds never leave their sheep, and he was just going off about it. And I was like, I'm putting that in the next one. So if you were in second, third service, I really teased that out a little bit. I'm like, dude, you would never special. Do that. Yeah. And I was thankful for Rick to share that. Like you just never do that. Unless they just somehow like got all those sheep and like, shoved them in the stable. I doubt it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what I loved about that was like those sheep in particular would have probably been sheep that were used in the temple for temple sacrifice. And so I feel like there's this beautiful thing in there, which William Barclay is the one that talked about that in his commentary of like, how amazing is it that these shepherds are tending the same sheep that would go to the temple for sacrifice, and they leave those to go be with the true final sacrificial lamb. Like that preached to my heart.
Oh, yeah. It was almost like that was a marker of new covenant.
Totally
incidentally, but Luke maybe was picking that up, but definitely as the story goes, it's like this is a significant thing here.
Definitely.
Well, and Luke historically has been linked to, I think the animal, each one of the Gospels has an animal, and Luke's is an ox, actually an ox with wings. And so his whole thing, he's driving through his whole Gospel is sacrifice. Oh, yeah. So all of those little undertones are all cool. Pointing you towards, like John, Gospel of John's an eagle. He rises up. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And then what does the Word of God do? It swoops down and move into the neighborhood, right? Through these stories like the woman at the well. So Luke's whole objective is like the ox,
right? And just even sacrifice. Deep diving on Luke a little bit more too is Luke, just in case you don't know, it was supposedly a doctor of some sort, and he wasn't an eyewitness account to any of these things. He was actually, after Jesus had, died and risen from the dead, he was now going to interview all of these people. So his account is literally, he sat down with Mary and said, tell me the stories. He probably tried to track down those shepherds, at least one of them, maybe all of them, and said, tell me what happened. And so that's how and then he's going and synthesizing that into a story. Yeah. And what's fun is Luke is the only one that actually has baby Jesus, 12-year-old Jesus, pre-30-year-old Jesus stories. Yeah. And so that's where that comes from. So Luke definitely, he's synthesizing all of these stories and writing what he thinks is very meaningful to the story, or things that were jumping out of him in a post-resurrection kind of perspective and mindset. And so, One for Israel is an organization, but they actually even go a little deeper with that same thought and kind of connect the whole idea of the Passover lamb was actually taken from, places like Bethlehem, and, we'll go through his inspection. So in regards to Passover and Easter, there's even kind of a more like focusing in on that Passover lamb and how it's very possible, like there's a connection to all of that. So it's very interesting. My wife was nerding out on it one day big time, and I was listening to it just going, whoa. The intricacy of the layers of what God was doing. Yeah. We'll never fully know.
Well, that's the point, I think, of like a slowing down. I think in this season, I think Advent helps us do that. It should. And for 1,500 years, I think that's been like the, whoa, let's slow down.
Don't miss it.
Don't miss it. Is there so much there? Yeah. And it's like, if you're a Jew, right? And then you've been waiting for this fulfillment of these prophecies, and then we're just in the West now, 2,000 years later going, can we just get through the story so we can get some presents? And, it's like, no. Like the writers are like, we got to slow down. Do you know what's happening? These shepherds and what they experience and the angels, it's like, there's this, and you can almost see them like writing down and going, all these details and how do we get this into there? So I think it's a good, like, slow down. As you're reading through the Christmas story, even with your family or going through, just slow down a little bit and go, this is a big deal.
I so loved that when you were really diving into that interaction between the angels and the shepherds.
Oh, me too, yeah.
And how it's like, there was a disruption in the shepherd's life, and their immediate response was sympathetic, right? Flight, flight or freeze. And they were deathly afraid. And you mentioned how, in the Greek, that means they had to change their pants. And then I thought it was so funny. You were like, but they were probably wearing robes, so I don't even know what's going on there. I thought and your manuscript did everything, so it's so fun that you were playing on that a little bit. Yeah. You did that really well. But they were filled with fear. They were gripped with fear, like toe to head. Mm-hmm. Their body chemically was exploding with fear. And their emotional state exploding with fear. Like they were so afraid of what they saw. Yeah. And I think oftentimes when we think about God or we think about heaven, we think about judgment. We know we have sinned. We know we've fallen short. Even when Jesus spoke words when he was standing in Peter's boat, the immediate thing Peter said was, "Depart from me, for I'm like, get out of here." Peter was freaked out. And I love that heaven's response to the fear was, "Don't be afraid." And I think that's what people forget about God is God's first feeling towards us, no matter what we've done, is always mercy. It's always love. It's, I want you. I want to be near you. Peace be with you, peace. Yeah. And I think every movie that I've seen, this is a way over exaggeration or statement, but it seems like every movie now is the hero's moment is where they finally say, "I'm not afraid anymore." Right? I mean, how many times have you heard that in a movie at the end where basically the struggle, whatever it is outside, is ultimately connected with the struggle inside this hero person. And then once they get to the point where they're not afraid anymore, it's like the enemy has no power anymore over them. And I think fear just is such a huge part of humanity. Yeah. And what God is doing is trying to get us free from fear. Yeah.
But I think there's a paradox there as well of going, we are to fear the Lord.
Yeah.
And
but the fear of the Lord is such a different thing, right?
Different. But and to find peace. So I think it's getting back to, I think one of the things you're driving is it's that focus. Like we're afraid of a lot of things, but within the Christian faith, it's like, no, you fear the Lord. And through that, you find this peace. Yeah,
So that is, I think, about power, though.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And so, and then what you're getting at with the stories in the movies is they're telling stories of self-referenced courage. Yeah. And what you're talking about is I don't have self-referenced courage. I get it externally from the other. So the power differential, the power dynamic ought to be that they stand in the presence of God. In this case, the angels, but the presence of God, and they are appropriately, that's why I said they have an appropriate response. You should fear the Lord and let him be the one to tell you not to be afraid. But until he says it, be scared. Right? Yeah.
Well, Jesus said that.
Find it within yourself to be like, I'm scared of God, but I got this.
Well, Jesus' words are, don't fear, those who, can only hurt the body. Fear the one who has weight over your soul, But and I think, again, all of these things we've talked about, it's not hope comes when there is all of the hopelessness is erased from your life. Yep. No, the hope comes externally, oftentimes most powerfully in the time where there's most hopelessness in your life. Joy. It's not something that comes when the absence of all of the, sadness is gone. No, joy is most profoundly found. The heaven's joy is most accessible oftentimes in the moments where there is the least amount of joy, no reason for joy. And peace is the same thing. In the moments of great fear, I think that's where the peace of God is most, it's easiest to understand this is the real thing. Because when you have peace based on your circumstances, it's always hard to tell, is this based on my circumstances or is this based on my confidence in the Prince of Peace? Mm-hmm. But when there's no reason to have peace and yet you do, it's such a like holy moment of saying, okay, this has got to be the Lord that's giving me this confidence. And I love what you're saying, because everything in the movies is always trying to have self-confidence, confidence in what's inside me. And the gospel is always saying, have confidence, be hopeful, be joyful, have peace. Yeah. But not because of what's inside of you, but because of the one who holds you in his hands. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So I was thinking, as it related to peace, one of the questions I ask a lot of people we meet with is, when was the last time you felt completely at peace? And I'm blown away by how few people can actually remember that or reflect on it.
They don't have a reference.
They don't have, yeah, it's like, you can ask them lots of questions. You ask them about peace, and they go like this. Their eyes kind of go back and go.
Well, that's a question I have for both of you guys, because I know you've done a lot of study, and you are a therapist licensed, and you're actually practicing that. You, I know, are studying church leaders and doing a lot of therapy for them, and actually doing a lot of surveys and all these things, trying to with what's the church? It's the Love Well app,
at the app
with Phoenix One and all of that work that you're doing. So both of you guys you got a pretty good pulse, I'd say, on segments of society right now, and we're hearing over and over from the news or whatever, like anxiety is at an all-time high, mental illness is an all-time high, suicide's all-time high. And I would I'm somewhat asking, what is that bearing out on what you're experiencing as you're navigating real life people and not just statistics coming from a news agency? And what like anxiety, loneliness, fear, addiction, what are some of the core baseline things that you are seeing? And obviously they all express differently or whatever. Is it just grief? Is it too much social media? What do you think is really driving some of those things, if they're really true?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's why I have a business, and why most of the people I know who are counselors are full or filling up, right?
And is anxiety, is that?
That's one component.
Okay.
And then, anxiety, depression. And by the way, like, these are all kind of diagnoses that there aren't blood tests for.
Right.
Right. This is just like the DSM is just a way of clustering symptoms together to try and organize it and make sense of it.
What's DSM stand for?
It's the book on psychology.
Statistical manual.
Yeah, it's just basically how they diagnose.
Yeah, it's the diagnostic tool for mental illness.
Yeah.
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, Mental Health.
Nice.
I should know that.
It's kind of like when somebody's like, they have an
Totally.
abbreviation for a prescription. Totally. Like, well, what's the actual name of that?
Well,
it's like,
I actually don't. So I don't use it because I don't diagnose, because I'm private pay. Yeah. And then I think diagnoses for mental health are helpful sometimes in certain situations.
Yeah.
And if you're using insurance, you have to have it. Yeah. But in my case, you don't. And so, sometimes they can be stigmatizing, and they can be, and to my point, it's like, basically people are unwell. They're unwell mentally, they're unwell emotionally, they're unwell physically, and they're unwell spiritually. Like, that's the anthropology of humanity, right?
Yeah. And
people are unwell, and I think increasingly unwell. And I don't know about the world, but like in America, and there's a enormous amount of factors. Our food, the toxins that we're exposed to, how we spend our time, the rise in technology, loneliness is a factor in it. There's lots and lots there. And for each client, it's different. Like, it could be that, their lifestyle choices are the main reason, or their relationships are the main reason, or childhood trauma are the main reason. You have to figure that out per person.
But I actually think one of the things you pointed out on Sunday that was so great were these circumstantial things that, if we just get through this, or if I just have this, then everything will be fine. Right. And it's kind of like, this is a part of this, like, fallout of postmodernism. It's like we were pitched all these dreams, all this stuff that was going to happen. If we just did X, Y, and Z, if you just invested here, then everything's going to work out. And I think we're in a season where people are starting to come to understand that's not happening. And I'm really interested in watching people, some more famous people, kind of come to faith, and listening to their story and going, what is that about? What's happening there? And in each one of those stories, and I'm starting to kind of track and just listen and pay attention, there was like, I put all my hope in this, or I put all my, chips in that bag. It didn't work out, and I'm left. And what are you left? Well, I remember going to church when I was a kid and how I felt there.
Right.
And then there's this return back to try to find whatever happened there. I ran away from it. It was weird. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm finding it again here, but it's not in drugs. It's not in alcohol. It's not in money. It's not in fame. It's in God.
Yeah.
In actual shalom. And so I'm just really interested in watching as people kind of experiment with kind of the stuff you're talking about, trying to find peace, seeking after it, and all these other things, and thinking, if I just have this, then I'll have peace. And that absolutely falling apart. And then they keep running after another thing and running after another thing. So within at least my space, that's 100% the same thing. But I think that's I think you're true. I think it's a very human thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're obsessed in our culture with medicating symptoms.
Yeah.
So we like medicine. And so we try
artificial
one thing.
peace.
Yeah, we try one
exactly.
thing. It helps a little bit for a little while. And then we're like, oh, that's not working anymore. Try a new thing. And there's whole industries that make money on that, And so what you're getting at is like, we don't just need medicine for the symptoms. We need healing, and we need a cure for the disease.
Well, you toyed on this, a couple of times throughout the message. One is you talked about going elk hunting with your dad in Northeast Oregon. Where do you go?
It's the Umatilla National Forest. It's like near the Idaho border.
Okay.
It's way out there. Dude.
Yeah,
like
and
Joseph? Joseph?
I think it's way further than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And yes, I'd love to come to you next year.
But you talked about how you would go there and you would have this moment of peace. But it was two things. One is it was selfish peace. It was peace for me, but not for my wife because she's back home with the kids or whatever. And then it only lasted as long as you're there. Yeah. And as soon as you come home, it's gone. And you said, how do we find a peace that is not self-centered and that lasts wherever we might be, which is a beautiful question. And then you even said, now how do we find a peace that actually can contain all of the fear or anxiety or pain in the world, right? That can overcome that, which is, you didn't really go deep into that, but you mentioned that as kind of this, like, is there a peace out there that can do these things? Yeah. And the challenge of that, and you guys, hopefully you'll track with me and be able to add in on this, but the challenge that I find is, I believe that the Prince of Peace, both will bring about everlasting peace, and that we have access to that everlasting peace right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And whether or not I've tasted the full thing or just a little drop, either way, that like I've tasted that peace that passes understanding, peace that is more potent and powerful than the reality of the world that we're living in. With our empirical senses. And then you have this peace that lasts, but in my experience walking with Jesus, I'll have peace, but the peace comes and goes all the time in my life. But I don't, and here's where I think I'm trying to unpack this for myself and hopefully anybody that's listening, that the peace that Jesus brings, it's not that it comes and goes, but the world that we live in continues to shift and change. So that peace, Jesus is always at peace. Actually, when we see him in the scriptures, he's seated at the right hand of the Father. Yeah. He's in a place of peace. Yeah. He's seated at the right hand of the Father, even though there's all this stuff going on. And I think when I come into Jesus's presence, that peace is always there. So it doesn't come and go. The problem is I come and go. My experience is I'll be connected with that peace, and then I'll go walk in this world for a little while. Look on social media for a little bit. Interact with somebody I love, and then all of a sudden I'm not peace. But I can always go back. To that. So the fountain is always there. I don't own the fountain. I have to go to the fountain. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah, I guess I would say but the fountain is in you. Like wherever you go, the Spirit goes with you.
Yes.
So you might ignore it.
Yeah.
I wonder if I feel more comfortable with like maybe that
ignoring
perspective
it.
of like, because the fountain of peace is in your
within
body.
you.
Like
Totally.
the Spirit goes with you, the kingdom goes with you.
It's always accessible.
But it's still in an already not yet reality within you. And so I think it is really like, how do I, and I think that's where the instruction to like pray without ceasing is like, if we're in communion with Christ, like at every moment.
Well, and I think I joke all the time when I teach, like we were given a false brochure about following Jesus, which is, you'll have this, you'll have this, you'll have this, it'll be like this. And I just go like, the Christmas narrative is so helpful because everyone's inconvenienced that gets embarked by, the wise men have to travel for months. The shepherds freak out and they leave their sheep and livelihood. Mary's like, what? And then Joseph's like, what? Like everything gets harder.
Yeah.
It's not like it gets better. It's not like it gets, well, I shouldn't say useful. It's not like their life gets better because Jesus shows up. And I actually appreciate that. That feels very human.
Yeah.
That it's not like it's like Jesus shows up and Mary's like, oh, now we get to, like, no, you run to Egypt. Like everyone's coming after you. You can't even get a room to deliver this baby. You got to go in a barn. Everyone's criticizing you. And I actually find that to be far more realistic than this brochure. That when we come to know Jesus, here's how easy it is. So I think what that does for me though is it has to draw you into that fountain of peace. Yeah. Because otherwise, circumstance is going to continue to tell you that this isn't true, this isn't right, and I need to run away from it. So I have to come back to that fountain. So it's like, I look at it like there's this foundation, and Jesus talks about this in Matthew 7. And then I have to build on that foundation, and I probably do it wrong, right. It's a little wonky, but I still have that foundation to go, I'm okay, I'm safe.
Yeah. And I think what I was trying to say is the idea that, just because my peace comes and goes doesn't mean Jesus is not
constant.
It's not constant.
No.
But it could be that if my peace comes and goes, that there is something else. Like obviously, if you're getting drunk or whatever, hey, you got some peace, but then you wake up and you don't have peace. Right. So I'm trying to Jesus's peace and the world's peace. I think one of the things is both of them feel like they come and go, but Jesus's peace never goes. Right. It's always there. It's us that are either engaged with it or not engaged with it. And so one of the questions is, when you guys find yourself in a day or a situation or something where you're low on peace or you feel anxiety or whatever, what do you do? Like, what have you learned over life that says, okay, I'm going to try and I'm going to go to the fount. And whether it's in yourself or whatever, like, how do you access the peace of Christ in those moments? What are some things that have helped you?
Yeah, I have these like, I use them sometimes when I teach. I have these hands. No, but it's like a posture. It's like fingers. It's like a posture of my life. Like I'm doing this with the Lord. I'm doing this with the Lord. Or I'm doing this. Okay, and this being, just for those listening, this being I'm pushing the Lord away. Pushing the Lord away. I have one hand up and one hand bring it towards me.
Sometimes I'm saying stop it and then more.
Yeah, stop it more. And then like, no.
And sometimes just surrender.
Most often when I'm in a place of not sensing peace, I'm doing it on my own. I'm trying to solve it. And to be honest, I have lots of abilities. I've, had decent amount of success doing things on
energy.
I got energy. I'm still passionate. Yeah. But what I find is stuff's not working out and I'm working real hard. And I start going, oh man, like, can I tell a story? Like yes. I went through this period of time where I'm like, I've been pastor for 20 plus years. Stuff's not working out. I had just gotten diagnosed with cancer. And I'm like, what's going on? So I go on a walk and I just felt like the Lord just go like, hey, just be. Don't use words. Just wait for me. And it was really painful for me in the best kind of way, in the best kind of painful way. So I'm going on this walk and I just sense I sense slow down. And I'm like, is that really what you're trying to say? Because I feel like I've heard that my whole life.
Not you too, God.
Get off, man.
Really? It's the same message?
It's the same thing.
But things are different
But then
now.
I felt like immediately after that, it was pace. So I went back and I did some work on pace. And he was like, be in pace with me. And pace is attached to peace, is pax.
Go at my speed.
Yeah, go at my speed. And I realized for most of my life, I've just been outpacing.
Yeah. Come on,
Lord.
Jesus, catch up.
Yeah. Come on. Like, we got stuff to do. And he's like, so for me, one of the things I do to try to evaluate is if I'm out of peace, I'm out of pace. And so I'm trying to back up and go, okay, I'm moving too fast. So he's like, no, I'm not in a hurry. You know, why are you in such a hurry all the time? You know, I'm always telling my wife, I can't for the life of me understand why I outpace her on a walk. All intimacy is like right there with her. Like, I have nowhere to be, honestly. But somehow I find myself all the time in front of her. It is a posture of life, a posture of heart. And I think I do the same thing. So for me, one of the things I'm trying to like, and again, that's the hand thing, but it's also going, oh wait, something's not right. And I find it's a pace problem for me.
Yeah, so when you're finding yourself out of peace, you check your pace.
I check my pace.
Yeah, and you're not of the type of person who's a little bit too behind the Lord.
No.
It's like you're saying, come on, Jesus, what's taking
let's
you
go.
so long?
Let's take the ground. And he's like,
That's
no,
awesome.
just be here with me.
What about you?
I like
Jr.?
what Jeff said. I mean, from now on, do that.
Yeah. Try that one.
I'm just taking notes. I sing. Mm-hmm. Singing is worshiping, singing, playing music, writing music, which has like neurophysiological. We can get into that, the vagus nerve and all that too.
Yeah.
I've learned that now. I have some just like rules of life for me. I do yoga. I cold plunge. I do sauna. I do a lot of just like self-care kind of things. A lot of breathing.
That a little bit? I mean, obviously everything's somewhat connected, but is there a distinction between like a spiritual practice versus more of a mental health practice? Or
I think I don't distinguish those. Like,
right, that's what I'm saying.
They're all spiritual.
Those are those
so
are all
connected.
spiritual for me, right?
Okay.
Like those are all.
Yeah.
So I'm going for like what I said earlier of just like that ceaseless connection with Jesus. Like, I want to be walking with him, and I want his presence to be in me and dwelling within me and making himself known to me like moment by moment through all of those gifts, right? So like for me, I think I only said it in first service because I was low on time yesterday. So I was like how I love when the wisdom of science catches up to the wisdom of the Bible.
Yeah.
Which is what all that parasympathetic stuff is about. For me, it's just like God using all of these tools I now have as a therapist to join me in those practices that actually do just bring me a ton of peace. But it's like the Lord doing the healing work for me.
Yeah, and let's just, because we've been mentioning parasympathetic and sympathetic, just for people who maybe didn't hear that, and anybody who did hear it, it's still good to review. But the parasympathetic and the sympathetic are two states of mind, of chemical kind of realities inside your body.
Yes.
One of them you described as rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic, which is peace, which is a good state. And then the other is the fight or flight. I think people are pretty clear on fight or flight, like, panic mode.
Yeah.
That's a sympathetic state where your body's firing all this adrenaline, and it either causes you to like want to fight everybody or just run for the life of you, or freeze is a new thing that they're added where you just...
So freeze actually is parasympathetic. That's dorsal. So
what about fawn? I've recently heard also fawning. Fawning's like...
Interesting. I don't know about that.
Yeah, fawning's like whatever you need. You know, it's just like whatever. You know, it kind of gives into the whatever you need as long as you're happy. Yeah. So fawning.
Maybe.
Yeah, fawning's
But talk to us
one.
about the parasympathetic with the rest or digest. Unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's like, it really is. So parasympathetic is, so you have nervous states. The three main nervous states are, these are polyvagal nervous states: ventral, sympathetic, and dorsal.
Okay.
Ventral and dorsal are both sympathetic. Parasympathetic.
Okay.
And then sympathetic stands alone. And that's fight or flight.
Okay.
Parasympathetic is either ventral or dorsal.
What's the difference between those two?
So parasympathetic is like nothing but a positive state. So resting and digesting.
So is dorsal versus the other one? What Is
So dorsal
a positive rest?
When
They're both positive
when you're
rest?
asleep, you're in dorsal.
Okay.
If you pass out, you're in dorsal. If you freeze because a gunman comes in and you don't know what to do and you just sit there, you're in dorsal.
Okay.
So dorsal, it can be, all of them can, our sympathetic state can be positive or negative. The dorsal parasympathetic can be positive or negative. The ventral parasympathetic is all positive.
So what's the ventral? What situation?
So
is
the
it?
ventral is I feel safe, calm, and connected.
Okay.
So it'd be like right now, I don't feel like I'm not under any threat right now. My body isn't under any threat. So I'm like nice and calm, right? But I probably have like right now a little bit of a blended state where I'm blended between I have some sympathetic, like some positive sympathetic nervous state where I feel really activated, where I'm like on right now. I'm like thinking, using my brain, whatever. But I probably have a little bit of anxiety of like, hey, even though I just preached on this stuff, like what if he asked me a question I don't have a good answer to? Or like, oh, he asked me what the DSM stood for and I couldn't recall it and I feel a little bit of shame. So I feel a little bit of anxiety about that. So we're a lot of times in like blended states.
Yeah.
Or if I am starting to feel like a little bit anxious or bad about myself, I might disassociate and start thinking about something else and not listening to what you guys are saying.
Yeah.
And that's dorsal.
Yeah,
so we're kind of moving in and out of these states all the time.
Yeah.
And so the goal actually isn't as a human to just get to ventral and stay there. Like that's not what I'm doing with
this
my
may or may
clients.
not make sense because I may or may not be an idiot.
Right.
But
I'll let you know in a minute.
as far as the prefrontal cortex and the blood that goes there, I know fight or flight no longer is blood flowing to the prefrontal cortex, which is your decision making. So in fight or flight, probably in an extreme case, it's like there's a loss where in some of the trauma-informed care, they talk about downstairs brain versus upstairs brain.
Yes.
And you get into downstairs brain where now you're not being rational like you normally are. And that would be that sympathetic state where it's just panic.
That's right.
And freaked out. And is there any of those states where you have the most prefrontal cortex activation where you're thinking as clearly and good as possible? Or
no,
it doesn't make sense?
No. So the autonomic nervous system is an automatic response, and it's bottom up. It's like your body and your gut and your whole body is like the second brain of your body, second brain. And so before your prefrontal cortex has time to figure out what's happening, your body has already told you that you're afraid or that you need to run or fight or do your thing.
Which is interesting. I was imagining, I had heard this, Gladwell had done a bunch of stuff on, it was in Blink, the book Blink, but about how I think this is fascinating. If you're running down a mountain, like your brain is making decisions before you've even gotten there. That's why you don't just trip because it's told you ahead of time.
Like subconscious.
So where to step. But you're not, you're just doing it. So in some ways, emotionally, is that...
Now, the thing that makes us like superior to the animals, right, is that we have a prefrontal cortex that's as sophisticated as we do. Yeah. And so our prefrontal cortex has more resources than any other species to like tell ourselves to calm down.
Yeah.
And so there is this beautiful thing of like the scriptures talking about like be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Yeah. Like use your faculties to calm yourself down. But we have way overdone that. We've way overdone that in the West. I think Therefore I Am has ruled the day. Yeah. And so that's part of how we got where we are. We're ignoring the limbic system, which is just below the prefrontal cortex. That's where our amygdala is. That's where our hippocampus, all our memory processing stuff's there. Our connection to other people, relationships, our grief centers are there. And then below that's our brainstem, which has our vagus nerve, 4 branches of the vagus nerve that connects to our autonomic nervous system. And those 3 states. So that's what I'm saying. Like I'm doing autonomic nervous system mapping in real time with you guys. I'm saying, hey, I feel safe, but I also feel a little, I'm on. You know what I mean? And then at times I'm going to just like check out.
Yeah.
I'm running those.
It's so fascinating what's going on in that brain. And still, there's so much that we don't know about the brain.
That's my favorite thing ever.
Wild,
oh my gosh. That's my favorite thing ever. I had heard a thing that I think we've only discovered, with everything we know.
It's like, I think, therefore I don't know.
Yeah.
Should be the real
I think we've only discovered something like 2%, 5% of the universe or whatever. And it's like, we think we're so smart.
Yeah.
You know, I find that, and same thing with the brain. Fascinating and so humbling. Like, it's so humbling, which gets back to this idea of peace, of going, I'm not in control.
Yeah.
I'm not in control. Then what do I do if everything feels out of control and I don't have an explanation for why things happen? I have to drive. And that's what I'm seeing, at least culturally, some people going, everything feels out of control. Where do I go? And I think it's why suicide's on the rise, because you go, I don't know where to go, I end, or I don't know where to go, I need help.
So let's talk about how, like, the gospel and the kingdom and the church, like, we can talk about therapy all day and everything, like, and that's all fine and good. But, like, the actual family of God is the healing agent for this.
Yeah.
So, like, when you come in, like, you need co-regulation. If you're stuck in a nervous state, what you need is co-regulation from another person.
Self-regulation versus co-regulation?
You need to be in the presence of another one. Yeah.
Because you can't self-regulate when you're in that state.
If you get triggered, a trauma response. And what happens is, like, we use the hand model of the brain, Dan Siegel, if you guys know this at all.
Fist, he's holding up a fist.
You can't see it, it's like a fist, and it's like your wrist is like the brainstem.
Yeah.
The prefrontal cortex are your fingers wrapped over the top, and your thumb, you lift that up, that's your amygdala. When you get triggered, it's like your fingers spread out like up above like this, and this doesn't mean anything.
It's just, there's no longer rational thinking.
Dude, think about last fight you had with your wife.
Yeah.
We don't fight. We just pray.
So all you do is disassociate. You're just stuck in dorsal. Yeah. Let me give you my card. And total denial, deflection. Yeah, we were getting a heavy, hit a sore spot, and so you had to deflect with humor.
You know what? I just checked out of whatever you just said.
I was just thinking about that.
Okay. Last time I had a fight with my wife. Oh my gosh.
Don't put that on me.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't mean to project on you guys. You get where it's like, I can't even think. I'm just having like a visceral response, and I'm saying irrational things. I'm doing irrational things.
Yeah.
My tolerance, I can't
My
make
wife totally
sense
does
of
that.
it.
Not me. It's always my wife that's doing that.
That's doing what?
That's saying irrational things.
Okay. All right.
But I'm always, no. Just kidding. I do the same
She's so lucky to have you.
Man,
anyway,
you're just really describing my wife right now.
Yeah. You guys are deflecting with a lot of humor. This is really hard for you guys. We're going to get through it. Dalton, are you seeing what's happening right now?
Oh my gosh. I see it all.
Stop the tape.
God.
Stop the tape right now.
Yeah. These guys do not want to have therapy done on them right now. Your prefrontal cortex is no longer available to you.
Yeah.
And so if I'm with you and I'm a safe, calm presence, you can actually borrow my prefrontal cortex and use it to regulate yours. It's called mirror.
If they can trust you.
Yes, if I'm actually safe. So it's called mirror neurons.
Yeah.
A guy named Dan Siegel. He coined the term interpersonal neurobiology. His book is,
I love that co-regulation, because I mean, you know, with people I've been with who are in a crisis situation, they can't self-regulate.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, obviously, like a child who gets into a fit, they can't. They're at this point they've lost the ability to self-regulate,
right?
And so a parent with discipline or whatever it might needs to be can help get them back into a place where they're regulated. And so that's that co-regulating you're talking about. That's awesome.
Here's a tip for you as parents. You can't try to rationalize reason with your child.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. You know, your balloon flew away. You'll be okay. We'll
Especially
get you another
if
one.
they made you so mad. You're not using your prefrontal cortex.
It's really more like, oh my gosh, your balloon, you lost your balloon.
Yeah.
That's so painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sad.
Yeah.
You loved that balloon.
Right.
One of the things I think that I love that you're bringing out, I think is so important, is in the individual pursuit of peace, let's just say, and the communal. Because I think within Western culture, it's so my personal relationship with Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
And what I love that you're bringing in is this is the body of Christ healing, helping, that he's using to help us heal one another. Yes, he is the foundation, but we're all out there dysregulating and are out there being crazy. You come together as a community when 2 or 3 are gathered. I know it's about conflict, but even that, a three chord strand is not easily broken. But the idea of the body with many parts, coming together, that actually it's not just you and Jesus. Yeah. It's you and Jesus in the community that's all around you helping. Oh,
right. In trauma-informed care, right? It's attachment and belonging.
Yes.
Yeah, and dude,
so all of the damage that happens to a young person who didn't have attachment and belonging, the statistics are unbelievable for. But attachment and belonging, I mean, we have to believe, is also a healing agent. So even if damage is done, attachment and belonging is still what is needed for healing. And that attachment and belonging, I mean, that's the mom holding the baby when they're young. It's creating something so intense in that baby's mind, in their development, just attachment and belonging. But that's the family, like you're saying.
So this was so beautiful. And I mean, even what you're saying about the community, I wish I would had more time, to talk about this, but in my sermon. But if you just do Christian practices, like come to church and sit next to a person that is like loving and safe, and worship, like singing activates the vagus nerve. You breathe differently when you sing. So it helps your body breathe. It calms, it will lower your heart rate. It'll regulate your breathing, just to like sing and worship, being in the presence, hearing the truth, and then doing things like sitting down to a meal with another Christian and not being in a hurry and chewing slowly. So slow chewing will activate your vagus nerve.
I got to work on that.
It will also make your digestion better.
Rest and digest.
This is the getting into all the stuff that the work that Renee does, like with her clients. So she's talking about functional health.
Your wife,
She's going to her clients, you need to chew more slowly. You need to eat your meals with other people. Don't eat on the go, quickly by yourself while you're looking at your phone. Go out to lunch with somebody, or sit in the break room with them and eat your meal really slowly and have a conversation with them. And conversation slows our eating down.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. I just can't get, this idea of like together. Like if you don't feel at peace, you can borrow some of mine. And how beautiful. How beautiful. And it makes me sad. I think there's just so much loneliness out there, and they just need to borrow some from the community of God. And it's just my whole life, personal relationship with Jesus. Yes. And the body of Christ coming in to continue to help us to heal one another. It's him. It's all about him, but it's also us together. We're going to be doing this for all of eternity. Yeah. And yet somehow here on earth, again, we've taken this Gnostic way of thinking about things, instead of just going, no, this is what he's saying, life and life to the full. It's not just this individual thing. It's life and life to the full together.
Right, I got a couple questions. So we actually at Living Streams, Dalton can attest to this, and all of our kind of vision team, executive team type planning and stuff. We're like, okay, Lord, what do you have for us 2025? This year was a year of preparation, we called it. And next year, I mean, it was just super clear, super strong that next year we need to provide as many opportunities for attachment and belonging as we can. Like that is what not just our church, but that's what the society around us needs. Because of the loneliness and anxiety, people need attachment and belonging. So how do we do that? A year of connection, it's just how do we get people connected? And so there's mentoring, there's all these type of things. What got you into connection with the family of God? Like at what point in your story, or what were the things that helped you actually find that? Because there's people out there going, hey, cool, attachment and belonging, I'd love it. Connection, I'd love it. But all I got is loneliness and anxiety right now. So how do you get it?
Oh,
You had to get in downtown San Francisco.
I actually think you got. I mean, I watch you guys. I mean, and hear stories. Like I feel like this is an area I really need to grow in. I think I'm feeling it so deeply because I'll be 48 this year.
Uh-oh.
And I know. And I've lone wolfed it. You know, I have friends, I have people I know, people I care about. But I just realized, like, man, we have just been surviving. And I had a buddy call me a couple weeks ago, and I opened up to him about, this year and some struggles and stuff like that. And he's like, man, I was feeling like, and this is a guy I know really well, his close friend. I was feeling like you were going through some stuff. I wish I'd have been more there for you. I guess, to be honest, I didn't let you. And I was like, man, I need to grow in this. So I actually look at, I know you guys have deep friendships and the way you guys do that. And I actually really appreciate that about you. And you're really good about inviting people in. I actually feel like it's an area I need to work on. I feel like we have been surviving. Patty and I, we'll celebrate 26 years of marriage, December 26th, which is such a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for her and our family. But we're starting to go like, man, we need to learn to, and honestly, that back row crew, we always joke about it. It's been really a redeeming thing for us, of
Place
just being
of
back
belonging.
there, having like a little community there in the back row I look forward to it. I know Patty does every week. We look forward to that community back there. Just the quirkiness and the joking around, and we're always inviting people to come be a part of that. We love it. So I think that's been like a good step forward. So anyway, I mean, that's, for me, I think this is an area I really need to grow in. I really do. I've been serving the body for so long, and now I just need to be a part of the body. And not that I don't stop serving.
Yeah.
I just think participating.
Yeah.
So you guys do such a great job at it, in my opinion.
Thanks,
Was it
man.
hard in San Francisco to create that?
It really wasn't.
Okay.
There, because if you're a Christian in San Francisco, you're like desperate for a Christian community. You're like,
Yeah.
I need to find
That
this.
was Ireland, for
So
sure.
we had
Yeah.
we had very small community, but very deep community. We only ever had like 50, 60 people, and then people are moving away all the time, coming and going a lot. It's like college ministry, doing church
transient.
planting. Yeah, very transient. But I think that God has gifted Renee and I as very hospitable, connected. We build communities. We're gatherers.
Yeah.
So we have like several pockets of communities, and we have a capacity to spread ourselves pretty widely and still be very deep with people. Not everybody has that capacity.
Right, yeah.
And so
And you guys share that together, too.
we have it together.
Yeah,
We have it together. Yes.
That's cool.
We're both just very like hospitable. And then our attachment styles, if we want to get into that, our attachment styles lend themselves to being more that way, where we're a little bit more on the anxious attached style, moving towards secure attachment. Whereas if we're a little more avoidant, it would be harder I think it's harder for people a little more on the avoidant side to connect with other people.
What attachment styles?
Yes.
We need a whole nother podcast for that, or is there some
If
place
you
somebody
want.
can go?
I don't
or-
want to take up too much time.
Dalton's
Okay. Attachment styles. Okay. We
Yes.
got to look that up.
We have
Whatever.
all of us have different attachment styles based on our
And
upbringing.
Jeff's is stiff arm. Is that what he was saying earlier?
This is
I don't
like
know.
run and gun and go.
It's very complex.
Keep up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's very complex.
But it's very helpful if you can identify where you're at.
Self-awareness is
yeah.
helpful, right? Like, isn't it? Like
Stating the obvious.
the Enneagram
Yeah.
and attachment
Yeah.
and polyvagal theory and autonomic nervous system. Like, the more we learn about these things and then learn the scriptures. But to answer your question more simply, when I was a kid, I always had a leader at church that was designated to reach out to me. Like when I was from like junior high through high school, there was like some guy. It was Ben Kelly when I was in junior high, and then it was Dave Malouf when I was in high school.
Because you were extra special, horrible person?
No, I just went to church.
Yeah.
Like, keep
my
your eye out on
my
that
parents
one.
paid them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, I just went to church. I grew up going to church. So I was part of the family of God. I was part of, we had people over, and there was, small groups, and there was all these things. So that was like built in, right? Community was built in. And then, when Renee and I got married, it was just like, let's have people over. Like, we want to have people over into our home. And so then when we were first married, we were doing college ministry, and it was like, if you're a college student and you want to come over like Sunday nights, we're going to do like a Bible study at like 6 for like an hour. And then you guys just hang out, and we just have college students like stay at our house till like 2 a.m. We'd be like, we're going to go to bed. You guys let yourselves out. So we knew like, in San Francisco, it's like, we're going to build a whole church around community. But I think discipleship is really what I'm getting at, is I think people get connected when someone says, hey, come be connected. Yeah. I think Jesus modeled that. Like, he went out and he found disciples and he said, hey, come follow me. Yeah. So I think it's like at our church, my prayer and hope for 2025 is like those who are gifted and equipped and able to create communities. And if we can help people create community in a way that feels life-giving to them and not overly rote and overly like, dude, bro, you make pizza.
I do.
You like make pizza. That's what you do. And people like pizza. So like for you, it's like, dude, throw a pizza party, like throw this many pizza parties. Yeah. And dude, you're like inviting your neighbors over for Halloween. You're building community like crazy, I think each of us finding like, what are those rhythms and those ways in which we create community.
Yeah. Larry Kravitz got a book called
Lenny Kravitz.
No, Larry Kravitz.
Are you going to go my way?
He wrote a book called Becoming, I think, a True Spiritual Community. I'd say it was written early 2000s. And it's like one of those books you're like, this book is right now. But his whole thing is around, if we did Christian community the way we're supposed to, we wouldn't need therapists. Because
attachment and belonging,
and he's a therapist,
so powerful.
and he's a therapist. Yeah. So he's giving a vision of what, through all his practice, he's giving a vision of what a true, I think it's spiritual biblical community looks like, in the communication that happens there. Yeah. And so the things that he maps out in that book, that might be one we all should read, but it challenged me
That's cool.
deep.
I'm praying that the Lord will
challenged me deep.
Connect a lot of people with just what you're talking about. Because ultimately it's Jesus at the center of the family, right? It's the connection to the head.
But it also starts with us as leaders.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It also starts with like, for sure. I gotta go figure this out.
Well, I started 2 years ago. I just had a bunch of guys telling me about a divorce that they had gone through, kind of through 2020 or 2021, and it was just there was enough of them where I thought, I'm doing it. Yeah. I just started a divorced dad's Bible study. I didn't tell them it was a divorced dad's Bible study. I just said we're starting a Bible study, and it was all these dads who were somewhat freshly divorced and had kids, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate that. And I was like, you guys need each other more than you need me.
Right.
So I just got them together. We had this awesome fellowship, and then just recently, and hopefully they won't listen to this podcast. If they do, it's fine. It's time for the cat to come out of the bag. Yeah. I had enough guys, probably around 30s or so, that were telling me that they're lonely, and I said, hey, let's start a Bible study. So I got a Bible study right now, and they are just now hearing for the first time that the whole reason I did it was because these guys needed each other.
Yeah.
They needed attachment. They needed belonging. And so I think, it's just simple stuff, but everybody everywhere, just trying to create attachment and belonging for people. And it is, I think, finding out your own style is probably a good idea. So that you're not burning yourself out, and then finding God has given each one an amount of grace. So that could just be one-on-one, that could be, starting a Bible study, but we each have a grace. And if we go outside the grace of God, then we're ahead of God and we're going to lose some peace.
I think attachment theory, there's so much about attachment is more helpful than knowing what your Myers-Briggs score is. People use extroverted, introverted language all the time. Yeah. And I'm like, I wish you'd just learn about attachment, because it's more we're more a product of our experiences than we are about some like mechanism like in our brain of like, oh, I'm just set to the extrovert setting and I'm set to the introvert setting. Like this is just how I am. Because I think attachment invites you to explore a little bit more like, well, why am I like this?
Totally. I have one last question that has just been banging around my head and I haven't forgot it. So I feel like maybe I should ask it. But we talked about how do we access peace? So if we're just walking through life and we find ourselves as followers of Christ not in a place of peace, it's not because Jesus has changed anything. We've established that. And you guys said that basically, you found some ways. Yours was singing, yours was pace. You check pace because it's kind of like we're overdoing it. We've become more frantic, or maybe like on the bipolar side, we've become more manic, is kind of thing. What about someone who maybe swings not towards the manic side, but towards the depressive? So when they find themselves at a lack of peace, it's not because they've been overdoing it necessarily. It's maybe because they have a depressive kind of state, or their body trends that way. What would you say is probably a good thing for them to be able to do? And maybe it's singing, maybe it's people as well. But any comments on that regard?
If you're struggling with depression, more than likely there's a grief there's a loss that needs to be grieved with somebody.
Yeah.
There's something that's stuck, you're holding on to it, and you're just trying to white knuckle it.
Yeah.
And you're
but grief always finds a way
I don't
out.
want, yes, grief is going to find its way into your body and your nervous system. And that's where that depressive, more dorsal, that'd be like a more negative dorsal dissociative state is happening.
It's a great book called The Grief Recovery Handbook. Have you read it? Yeah, it's excellent. Yeah, and it's probably the most pragmatic thing I've seen on grief, of going, one, we're all grieving something. We should be, or we, at some point in our life, we've all gone through really difficult things. But it does a really good job of helping create pragmatic steps to kind of deal with that grief, as opposed to run away from it. So if you are struggling with that's a great resource. The Grief Recovery Handbook has been super helpful, and we use it with people to say, go through it, and it gives you some things that you can actually practically slow yourself down to kind of deal with that. But the other thing I was thinking, like, again, getting back to community, one of the things I'm curious about, maybe from your point of view, is like, I've not really struggled with depression, so I'm not like but I deal with a lot of people who are, but they pull way back. And so that isolation, that loneliness only doubles down on that despair.
Because they can't borrow from somebody else to help them co-regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah. I think that's, I think that's an interesting thing. I really do think people in some ways swing to one side or the other in that regard. The grief thing is a great insight. And that grief doesn't have to be something recent. That grief could literally be something way, way back that maybe you haven't even thought about it, but it's in your system and it has to be processed. And grief is not a bad thing. I mean, I love when it says that Jesus was acquainted with grief, because one, that means he went through a lot of grief, but I also love the way that's phrased, because it's almost like he made grief his friend. He didn't run from grief. He didn't hide from grief. He didn't hate grief.
Right.
He basically said, okay, grief, you have some role to play in my life, and so I'm going to learn how to embrace you, how to be with you, how to grieve well, how to lament. And I think that's an important thing that we learn to do. And I know for me, I do a lot of memorials, and one of the things that I've realized is even touching someone else's grief can trigger all my own well of grief.
Definitely.
Watching something on a movie, right, can trigger, even though it's not real. But what happens is it taps into the fullness of all the grief in my life, and I experience it all at the same time. Yeah. And so in those moments, what I've realized is those are opportunities to kind of do a little pressure release. I kind of look at grief as like this pressure container inside me. And if I don't release the pressure every once in a while, it comes out in a really ugly, damaging, some sort of way. And so I try in those moments, just like, okay, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to let my face become so ugly and drip or whatever it is with crying. And sometimes I'll even, when I'm triggered in that way, I'll even go and like look at old pictures of my mom and dad, which I've lost my mom and dad, relatively young, but I'll go enter into that space and say, oh, maybe grief is saying, hey, we need to hang out for a little bit before something happens, or watch a slideshow of my mom's life. Or, I know my brother oftentimes will send just some pictures on a text thread to our family, and everyone just weighs in a little bit on the the day of my dad's birthday or something like that. Yeah. And I think what that is, it's saying, hey, I'm going into grief. I'll be back in a minute, guys, but I'm going into grief because grief is just such a part of life, and it has a role to play in our lives. It does. And it can bring something good. And I'll throw this out there just because I've been trying to not think about it, but we're wrapping up. I put my dog down this morning, actually.
Oh, sorry, man.
My dog of 14 years.
Wow. I'm sorry.
And it was such an engagement with grief. And obviously, I love this dog. He's my best friend. I mean, he is my peace. Okay. Jesus is my peace, for sure. Yeah. But whenever I needed peace, I would say, Luther, let's go. And we would just go watch a sunset together. This dog must have been through some stuff before. We got him probably about 6 months. I don't know what happened before then. But he would only come out of the corner of the house when everything was totally peaceful. It was like we knew when we were at peace because Luther would come out and just kind of walk around and be at ease.
He was like this barometer.
And as soon as like anytime someone was upset or anytime my kids got mad or anytime he would disappear.
Okay, interesting.
He would just be gone. And so it was like he was a barometer of peace for us. And but this is my Lou boy. This is my Luther. And I just was there. I was by myself with him and saying goodbye, and it was so good. And yes, I was saying bye to him, and I ended up saying I miss you, Mom and Dad. It was just so funny how it all was there. Like every sorrow I've ever been through was triggered in that moment, and so I've learned to try and be acquainted with grief. To not be afraid of, not hate grief or avoid it. It's going to work its way out some way. So you really do need to try and pressure release.
Yeah, my counselor said when I was going through a process because I didn't know how to grieve, he said you keep what you grieve. Like otherwise you lose these precious things because you kind of move on through life. Cool. But when you engage in grief, you keep the best things about that reality alive, and that was really. So exactly everything you just said is exactly what he was trying to help me engage in. And it was so helpful for me. But that idea of grief felt so foreign. And I think that's why I was so sick for so long, is I just didn't know how to, do that. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do with the Jesus who stood over Jerusalem and wept, or Lazarus, or, any of those things. I didn't know what to do with that Jesus. And so honestly, as I started sitting with Jesus in those moments, I actually started, I think, to become more human. Yeah. Which is interesting.
So wherever you are right now, you are a beloved son or daughter of God. No doubt about it. And his family is wide open to you, and his family is real, and his family is good. It's not perfect, but
flawed.
But it definitely is worth investing in, worth connecting to. If you've been lonely, I do think it's just really important for you to try and maybe it's just show up to a church service on a Sunday and just sit there. I noticed this last Sunday as you were talking, we were going through the worship, people were weeping. Yes. There was a lot of weeping going on in the church. But guess what? That is all of the things your body needs to process what it's needing.
Need to cry.
It's the best thing that can happen. All of the right juices are flowing to all the right places, and healing is happening. And it's hard to find that space. And yet you do need more personal connection too than just, a church like ours. It's a large amount of people. And so it's good and helpful, but we also want to keep pushing to say, hey, you do need some one-on-one. You do need to eat a meal with someone. And if you're in that spot, I just sent an email out to the church and I said, if you're looking for any kind of mentorship connection, just email me, let me know, and I'll start working on it. I'm not like, I was trying to think of one of those websites where they're matching people up. I'm not a matchmaker website, but we have a lot of people that have room to bring some belonging and attachment to someone. So 100%. So don't be alone. Reach out, try, keep trying, keep trying. Community is so important, and our devices and our technology are tricking us a lot of times from the stuff that we really need. So as this podcast ends right now, it's been great being with you, but now go be with some people in real life, flesh and blood, and we will see you next time.